let's see, without further ado, let's switch over to a view of Spoke, which is where we're going to be starting today. So not going to go into the details about the basics of Spoke. Hopefully, you can watch the previous video where we showed a lot about, more specifically, the architecture kit and how we build things. But today I'm going to get started and just choose a new project here, either at the top under new project, or if your list isn't as big as mine, you'll see a big button here that says new project. And then in terms of templates to start with, you could use a big, crater or the lake or something like that. We're just going to use, we don't really actually care because we're going to
Let's go with
delete.
the crater. I
I'm going to go
think
with the
that'll work
crater.
really well for this scene.
Okay, go with the crater. And, it'll start out like this. And yeah. So what are we doing?
So,
Let's talk a little bit about some of the new stuff that we've
yeah,
got this week.
yeah. So, just this week we added a bunch of new assets from Sketchfab. We've ran two contests now. The Mozilla Medieval Fantasy Assets Challenge and the Hubs Clubhouse Challenge. And so we're going to be building a scene using some of those and some other assets from around Sketchfab. And now in Spoke, if you go and click on Sketchfab in the assets panel down there.
So just to recap a little bit, last week we talked about this architecture kit
Yeah.
and all the pieces that go with that. Just a quick note
Oh
underneath
yeah,
that
that's
now
right.
this week, we have a new kit in there called the Rock Kit. It's very simple. It's not like 400 pieces like the other kit, but it has just a set of really useful um, sort of big boulder slab rock assets that you can use to build more interesting, more organic scenes, caves, platforms, things like that. So
Right.
check those out when you get a chance. But we'll move over down to the next one, which says Sketchfab. And Robert has gone in and actually done a lot of work to reconfigure what you see when you first enter this section. So
Yeah, so all the old categories are still there. You can still expand that and go and look at like architecture and all sorts of things down there. But we also have this new collections group, and so that contains a bunch of props that we use in hubs and like I said, these two contests. So I think we're gonna build some a scene using one of the Clubhouse contest entries.
right, the cool thing about these contests that Mozilla sponsored with Sketchfab was to have um, people like yourselves out there making things with a theme in mind. And so in the medieval fantasy contest,
Oh yeah, you should
for
go
example,
into
I
one of
mean, you can
these.
look through these. These are so great.
Yeah, there's so many of them.
There, if you click on one of these, you'll see all of the assets that people used. Part of the rules of the contest were not just to create one big scene with these things, but to provide all of the individual assets, which
Hmm.
actually turned out to be the coolest thing
Yeah.
down the line for us because
We
now
to
there
we
are.
totally planned that.
Did we?
No.
I didn't think we did. But we have yeah, lots of really cool assets. And the cool thing is because these are medieval themed, for example, even assets between different contest entries kind of go together. Um, some might be a little more realistic in their style, some a little more cartoony. But I mean, gosh, looking through this list, if you expand this, there are just some really great assets in here. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every single one of them is always going to work for you and for the scene you're trying to make. And so today we want to talk a little bit about how to recognize an asset that might be a little bit problematic and how to fix it.
Right. So all of these should be pretty good. I've gone through and kind of like checked them all out, made sure that they're pretty optimal. They're all pretty low poly. They have very few materials and they're not that expensive to
Like if
render
you
in
click on
general.
one of these and they should just come in,
Yeah.
and
It's usually scaled to the right height. There's very few things in there that kind of give you some surprises. So yeah, it just kind of just works.
pretty awesome.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely check those out. Those will keep you busy for hours, if not days.
Hmm.
But we're going to look at the one below that called the Hubs Clubhouse contest. This contest was about creating spaces that were designed to just be like cool to hang out in and do stuff. And the great thing about these entries was that um, the the participants in this contest really had totally different ideas from each other. They were not all the same by any means. So there are some things in here that maybe are like maybe more sort of medieval or fantasy
Hmm.
looking, and then you have other ones that are just more sci-fi.
Oh, this one's
Or
really cool.
we've got,
The Octodome.
oh yeah, that one was super cool. We had a bunch of hangout like
Yeah,
meetups
meetups
there,
in there, yeah.
and but like for example, this I think this might have been the winner in the end. The treehouse was an amazing
Yeah.
space. This one might be a little heavy just because of the number of trees in it,
Yeah,
but
some of the transparency stuff is a
yeah,
little.
for VR it's a little tricky. But there were some cool props in there. This theater one I
Oh, this
thought
one's so
was
cool.
amazing because the person who created it designed it with the idea of these props actually being like stage props in
Yeah.
mind. And so they all look like they're made of corrugated cardboard and cut out of things. So they're all flat, but they're really cool. So anyway, uh, check these out when you get a chance.
Yeah.
Today we're going to go to this one called Round Table Room, and you'll see a bunch of props in there, but the very last ones are the whole room itself.
Hmm.
And
Or everything put together. So
yeah,
we're just gonna do the blank room here.
this first one here, it says Roundtable Room slash empty slash Mozilla Hub. So um, rather than drag and drop it in, one other thing you can do in Spoke, which is really useful, is to be able to right click it and just choose place object at origin, the origin being the 000 spot in the world. And so if I click place object at origin, it just shows up there.
Yep.
And I know somebody asked about being able to see the the keystrokes and mouse strokes. I don't have anything right to do that right now, so bear with me. I'll try to say what I'm doing as I
I'll
as I
I'll
move
be
them.
asking all of the shortcuts in Blender for sure, because I don't
Okay,
know them.
cool. And you can quiz me too. So
Yep.
I'm going to turn off the grid just so I can take a look at this. In this space, which is pretty cool, it's like this tower with an open sky, and it's a little bit stylized in terms of texture. Like it doesn't look like it's um, like physically based or anything, but it's very cool looking. Has a almost painterly look to it.
Yeah.
Um, and
It's
just
pretty
to
empty.
it's pretty empty. And to remind you, you can fly around in these scenes in Spoke by holding your right mouse button and using the WASD keys on your keyboard, forward and back, left and right. And then you can always use the Q and E keys to turn yourself. And
Let's to turn the selected object.
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot. I'm not turning my camera.
Yeah. You're
Uh,
moving the room.
moving the whole room.
Yeah.
Yeah, to turn, you just move your mouse. Sorry about that. Okay, so empty room. Now, I don't know what kind of furniture you would put in here, but I think one of the things we were talking about was having some sort of a central model that we could use, maybe a statue or
Hmm.
something like a hero in game. In game development, you usually refer to that as a hero asset. It's usually a little bit higher poly than some of the other things in the scene, um, and it's going to be sort of the focal point. So we kind of went ahead and looked around on Sketchfab. You could definitely use the search function in here to find it, but I'm actually going to go over to Sketchfab and um, look at some of the assets there and
Yep.
get an idea of what's good. So we had found um, under their search, we clicked the downloadable checkbox first of all, because Spoke will only take in assets that are set to
Right.
be downloadable by the person who created them. And we were looking up statues, and I believe we found this one of Achilles, which actually happened to be a scanned photogrammetry model.
There it is.
And here it is over here. If I click on that in Sketchfab, you'll get a bigger view of it. And depending on the speed of your internet and your computer, could take a little time to load. But now we're looking at this model. Now, it looks pretty cool. Um, this is interesting because it was scanned maybe from a phone or some other camera from different angles to recreate this model. Um, it's pretty high resolution, and it's also has all of the lighting information baked into the surface. So you don't really have to worry about all the different
Hmm.
texture channels like shininess or roughness and things like that.
Right. So let's go into like this model itself. So if we brought this into Spoke right now, we could just copy and paste that URL.
I would, should we do it? Let's
Yeah,
do
let's
it.
do it.
I'll copy it.
Let's see what this
I'm
looks
gonna go
like.
back over to Spoke, and I'm just gonna
You
hit
can just paste.
Control V
Control V.
to paste it. You just make sure this window is active and
Yep.
paste it,
It takes a
and
sec. There
takes a
it
second.
goes.
You'll see the little loading cube thing happen, and it came in now. Came in way over there. I'm
It's
gonna
pretty small.
move it over. It's also teeny tiny.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit F to zoom in on it. Oh, that is not a hero
Yeah.
asset.
Needs to
It's
be a little bit bigger.
like tiny.
So the reason why it's coming in so small is because when Sketchfab takes models in from other sources, they do like a conversion process to convert it from whatever source format. In this case, I think it was an OBJ, um, or it could be FBX or anything like that, and they convert it to what we use, which is this other format called GLTF. Um, so when they do that, things might have been in one set of units. In this case, I'm not actually certain what units it was in. Um,
You can usually tell by trying to scale
yeah,
the model, not by using the scale tool, but instead just going into the properties of that object, make sure it's selected. And if I usually, you know, add a zero to this, so like
yeah,
if I put in 10,
multiply by 10. Yep.
that's closer.
Yeah,
But looking at it next to one of our
yeah.
avatar
We want to make
spawn
this thing
points,
big.
we want it to kind of be big and
Maybe
cool.
like
Like
a
at 100,
20.
it might be too
Yeah,
big.
that's probably too
Now it's like, well, sorry, I put the guy's rear end
big.
near. It's a little too big. Let's go. In this case, maybe like
Like 20,
20
30.
was probably pretty good.
Yeah,
Um, that seems like it could be pretty good. You'll also notice that um, the pivot point of this model is kind of floating off here, which could make it a little difficult if we were doing a lot of complex placement.
right.
And it could start to get on your nerves after a while that it's not down at the bottom and in the center of the model. So if we go in and fix this thing, that's something else we could do just to make our lives a little easier.
Yeah, we can also use the in Spoke itself, we can change the pivot point up there. So if we went to bottom, it's just gonna change the pivot to the very center bottom of that asset. And then if you went and hit grab, which is G on your keyboard, it'll snap to whatever is underneath it. So you can kind of just place it right there in
So
the
now
center
the
of the room.
placement's a little easier. So
Yep.
we don't have to fix the pivot point since we have nice tools
Yeah.
within Spoke to handle
If
that.
you want to
But
be able to place it super precise, if you see like there's still the base of the models a
yeah,
little,
it's
you
still going through the floor, and you might,
know,
we'll
there's,
notice some other things about this once we bring it into Blender and take a look at it. But
yep.
um,
Yeah, it's looking
size looks pretty good. So about 20. Since we know that when we're in Blender, we may want to scale it up
okay.
to about 20, just so we don't have to
Sounds
scale it
good.
here.
But yeah, let's go ahead and publish this.
Okay, so if we left this scene as is, I'm actually going to turn off snapping and slide it up a little bit to
Yeah,
be just off, just on the floor like that.
maybe spin it.
I'm going
Oh,
to move the spawn point back a little bit so that when I spawn in, I'm not staring at this guy's lap. And let me just change my snap turning a bit so that there. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and publish this to hubs and change the name to statue scene. Uh, the attribution, whether you want it remixed, I'm going to turn those things off right now and just
yeah.
hit save and publish.
Now this part might take a while.
It can.
Yeah, and it definitely looks like it is. All right. We're on super fast internet here,
We
but
are at Mozilla. It's pretty fast. So
yeah.
um, there it is. It's done. I can hit view your scene and
Yep.
it'll take us to that within
Then hubs,
hubs.
and then you can create a
Um,
room with it. So this is you can take this and you can share this scene with anyone, and they can
Yeah,
create
one
their own room.
I feel like this is a good time to talk about that just a little bit because I found within our community there's some confusion about the difference between a scene and a room.
Yeah.
Um, the scene is basically uh, a link to like if you share the scene link with someone, they can make their own room or rooms out of this scene.
Mhm.
Sharing a room link is a specific like instance of this scene.
Right.
Is there a better way to put that than that?
No, that's pretty good. It's like an instance of the scene where you can then hang out with people in that instance. The scene is just
Right.
the place.
Yeah, so the URL is different
Mhm.
depending whether it's a room or a scene. You may notice on the stream I've blacked out the URL because I don't want rando people joining us. But uh,
No offense.
yeah, we love you, but yeah, we don't need anybody in here right now. We're just trying to work on stuff. So uh,
Looks really good.
so it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna hit enter room just to see what it's like.